you suffering with a habit that's become destructive, or maybe you know someone whose habits are impacting you or your family?
A secret that is becoming increasingly out of control, or maybe even a full-blown addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, food, social media, shopping or pornography.
I'm Emma Heath, and this is my colleague Nat Moody. Over the next sessions, people involved with the National Recovery Course are going to bring you the Recovery Course testimonies, real people, real stories and real transformation. The Recovery Course follows the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but as they were originally intended, a set of 12 spiritual steps where we put Christ back at the heart of recovery. We will cover one step in each of these sessions. The course recognises that our destructive habits are a consequence of pain, hurt, a broken relationship, loneliness, or an issue from childhood. The truth is, we all carry pain, and it's hard to become an adult without carrying some of the baggage of life. We know that identification is key when addressing struggles, and what better way to bring hope than to share in people's stories of how they have been set free from the traps of addiction, compulsive behaviours, and other destructive habits.
Step 10. In this session, we will look at step 10, which says we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Cleaning house, the start of the maintenance step. Remember back in step 4, I talked about abseiling down into the pit. This step is now on the encouraging side of the ascent. These last 10 weeks, you've had to look at your relationship with your choices, your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, and your relationship with others. This step is the turning point. It is the step now by which you build the new foundation for your hardwiring. If your recovery was a house renovation project, all the guts, the wiring, the foundation of your old life has been taken out. New infrastructure, support, and hardware has gone in. This step is like all the wiring and plumbing going in before the top veneer goes on. Think of this as relapse prevention. You don't relapse when you drink or when you snort that line of coke, when you clicked onto that website to access that porn. The using was merely confirmation that you were already in the process of a relapse. It didn't come out of the blue. A relapse was happening in the days and the weeks building up to the using. So it is vital that we keep spiritually well, which steps 10, 11, and 12 help us with. For I know my transgression and my sin is always before me. Surely you desire truth in the inner parts. You teach me wisdom in the inmost place. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast from me your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. That's taken from Psalm 51 in the New International Version.
We know that there is hope no matter how dark things can feel. We encourage you to listen with an open heart to the testimonies each week and see how God can and will transform even the most hopeless of situations. He did it for me, he's done it for Nat, and he can do it for you.
Hi everyone, my name is Paul Lloyd, and I want to take just a few minutes to talk about personal progress. There's points in your life when you have to make decisions that are going to help you either to go forward or backwards. Some people think that they can stay in the same position, but life's not like that. It's a little bit like trying to walk up a down escalator. It's okay if you keep going, making progress, but if you think you can just stand still, then eventually you're just going to keep going back down. Directional perspective is something that has really helped me in my life. Since 2003, myself and my wife Vicky have pastored a church called Victory Outreach in Manchester, and it's a church that started with just a few people and a couple of ex-drug addicts. You see, that's what I was. I was a heroin addict and a crack cocaine addict. I had a life maintenance course of methadone and and my wife came from the same background. I went into a program called Victory Outreach, Victory Homes in London, that is run by the organisation of Victory Outreach. And it was there that I really started to understand how I was going to be able to make progress to get away from a life of addiction into a life of purpose and meaning. And the journey was one that had many ups and it had many, many downs. But there's been certain things that I've found out along the way that I think can be really, really helpful. In a book that I have out at the moment called Leading Broken People, there's a chapter in there called the sat-nav method or the GPS method. And this is something that has really helped me and has helped many, many people in various different walks of life in making decisions that help with their progress. See, progress is only good if it's going in the right direction. But how do you know what direction to go in? And then how do you know what to actually do? The GPS method or the sat-nav method is something that can really help you. And a sat-nav does three things. The first thing it does is it locks in your location. Your location is very key. If you can't find out what your location is, then the rest is redundant. I once had a guy call me, he said, "Pastor, I want to come to your house." I said, "Fine." He said, "Can you give me directions?" I said, "Of course." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Turn left." I don't know. I can't help you. See, your location is very, very important. And your location is about where you're really at. It's about who you really are. It deals with your identity as a person and the place that you're actually in life. That takes a lot of honesty, takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of really listening to other voices, to speak into our blind spots and having the humility to be able to take what it is that people say and what it is that we sense and come to find out about who we really are. If you can do that, and it's a lifelong journey, just like a sat-nav, you know, you change from place to place dependent upon where you're at. But just like a sat-nav, once that location is locked in, then the next steps can take place. So the second thing you do after the sat-nav is locked in your location is you enter a destination. And this is really important. Nobody makes progress by accident. Sometimes people might stumble into things, but generally you need to be doing things intentionally, not accidentally. So what's your goals? You need to put in a goal. Where do you want to reach? What is the alternative to where you've been? And then when you enter that destination, it's not going to be your forever destination necessarily, unless it's becoming a Christian and giving your life to Jesus and being saved and becoming a new creation. But that destination can shift and change as you grow. And then after the destination is set, then all of a sudden you start receiving instructions. And this is where you need to start looking at people that have gone before you, following in their footsteps, taking their advice. And then as you do each instruction, you get the next one, just like a sat-nav. And so if you employ this, it works across the board. I've seen it work literally thousands of times across the board with people that have come from gangs, from addiction, from alcoholism, from broken families and broken lives. And people change and transform. And in Jesus Christ, we become new creations. The old passes away and all things become new. So today, I am a new creation. 25 years, clean from heroin, from cocaine, and from any other drug. And I want to let you know right now that it's possible. And not only is it possible for people like me and my wife, it's possible for you as well. Take the steps, find out who you are, put your destination in, listen to advice, and then go for it. God bless you all.
Hello, and today I am joined with one of my really good friends, Louise, who not only has just another amazing story of recovery, but also she helps so many people in the work she does today. So listen and be entertained by Louise's story. Hello, Louise.
Hi, Emma.
Nice to have you here. Thank you so much for helping with the Recovery Course Testimony Series. So I'll let you tell a bit about your story to me.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Louise. I grew up in Bournemouth. From the outside looking in, we were a regular 2.4 family. My dad was the manager of the Bournemouth Casino Club, which was part of the Royal Bath Hotel. So from the outside looking in, everything was normal. You know, my dad was an alcoholic, and a lot of that was hidden from me as a child. So I grew up with a lot of secrets and lies. I learnt to seek approval as a under 10. You know, from 10 onwards, I learnt ways and means of getting more money. I was quite an awkward teenager. I went to the local grammar school, but my peer group from junior school didn't go, so I was quite socially isolated. So that negative attention's better than no attention. All my school reports say could do better. Played up a bit for attention, and then sort of 16, 17, 18, the rave scene hit, and I enjoyed going out raving. Drugs were a part of that. My journey doesn't include cannabis, so for me it wasn't a gateway drug. I took drugs, I loved them, I took more drugs. And slowly but surely the choice to take those drugs was taken away from me. So Friday, Saturday night became Thursday, Friday, Saturday, became Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I used to snort cocaine, so the middle bit of my nose broke down. I smoked crack for the first time, didn't like it, smoked it again. You know, I have no doubt, I'm under no illusions that I'm an addict. I can see it in lots of different areas.
It's funny you say that, because the same thing happened for me actually, but with cocaine. Sort of similar, but I actually liked it so much that I wouldn't do it because I knew it could be addictive. It's really funny how our heads can work, but they will still gravitate to something if we've got that addictive nature, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, pity for me it's not the gym and cleaning, because they would actually be quite helpful for me right here, right now. But I guess for people that do struggle with those addictions, it's equally as painful.
Yeah.
So I ended up addicted to crack cocaine. I found out I was pregnant. That was really traumatic, you know, because I knew what I was doing was potentially harming my child. I ended up with a heroin habit, which helped me not use the cocaine. Did a detox. So right from really 96, I knew that I was an addict. I didn't know that there was a solution, so I was committing credit card fraud to fund my drug habits. I was going out, and you know, just basically ways and means of getting more drugs, continual cycles. I would end up in prison. The first time was really traumatic. I didn't think I'd ever go back. I thought that threat of going to prison would keep me clean. It didn't, and that was basically my life for 7 years. And in 2001, I decided that credit card fraud and Bournemouth were my problems, and in recovery terms we call that doing a geographical. So I moved to Bristol, and I genuinely didn't know about the drug issues in Bristol at the time, and I was on bail, curfews and things like that. So I decided to move to Bristol, and then found drugs in Bristol. And at the beginning of 2001, I had a motorbike accident. And the reason I share this is because it led to some turning points in my recovery, but it also was the start of degradation, devastation, trauma. So I had a motorbike accident. I was wrongly diagnosed because I was honest about my drug use, and the hospital stereotypes do what unfortunately is still 20 years later still happens. You know, people that use drugs or have got addiction issues sometimes are marginalised, they are stereotyped. So to cut a very long and boring story short, I was left with a broken hip, and during that time my hip was left broken. My using was the depths of despair. I'm really lucky to survive it. I went to prison again, and I was diagnosed with Hep C, and it, you know, for me that wasn't a biggie. And again, the reason I share that is all the devastation, all the destruction, all the degradation God's used for his glory.
And I think you hit the nail on the head about some things that people battle with. It's rather than blaming it on circumstances, but sometimes circumstances, like for example your bike accident or being diagnosed with Hep C, it can make that downward spiral happen quicker, because it will still be happening, but it can push us in a different, slightly quicker direction. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So at the time I was diagnosed with Hep C, I also had levels of infections in my body. My hip was still left broken. They hadn't been able to do anything with it at that point. So it was the least of my problems. And you know, I had a hip operation. I had my ball joint removed whilst I was in custody. I was taken out on bed watch, they call it, where you're handcuffed to 2 prison officers 24 hours a day. It's the longest 23 days that I was in custody of a whole lot. But yeah, I got out from that sentence and thought the hip replacement would keep me clean. I'd gone to 12-step fellowships before as part of a detox or rehab, and kind of went, I haven't done that. So they talked to us about listening for the similarities, not the differences. Well, I just heard differences. And I ended up back in prison, and ironically, 2 of my drugs workers from my time in prison from 96 to 2003, I actually work with professionally now, and for me that link's so lovely. You know, like they saw me at my worst, and now they're in meetings with me, and
That's just amazing, because it's almost like that devastation comes back, but in a really different light. I mean, I actually saw my probation officer from when I was in my madness. She now is involved with the charity I work with. So we were actually on a professional level together, and it's crazy. I would never have imagined that. And she didn't even recognise me when she bumped into me, you know, how we can turn our lives around.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. And for me, everybody I came into contact with, you know, probation officers, the drug workers, you know, there were glimpses where they believed in me, but on the whole, if I was going to be one of those statistics, I was going to be a drug-related death. You know, probation officers, doctors, social workers, everybody. And I sit here 17 years later, not committed crime for 17 years, not taken drugs or alcohol for 17 years, you know, so...
That's just, honestly, it's just, this is what we need to hear, you know, because it is real, like we say, it's real people, real lives and real testimonies. And there's people probably sitting on the edge of their seat right now thinking, well, how did that happen? Because it's really hard when you're in it, isn't it, to ever envisage that you can be free of that addiction. So tell us a bit about what happened.
Yeah, so I went back to prison and I kind of surrendered. I said, okay, I hear you. I accept that I need some therapy, and they applied for funding for rehab, and I went to rehab. And I think my damage was visible to everybody. I had a build-up on my shoe that was 5 centimetres to correct the bit where they'd taken my hip out. Every bit of my body's scarred, you know, my teeth were rotten. So it was visible to everybody what my using was like, you know. And it was difficult, and I used once after my treatment, my residential treatment, and it was really painful, and I kind of knew that I had a choice to make. And my choice was, do I want to be on the periphery and risk falling off, or do I want to be in the centre? And at this point, I was linked into a church, and I felt, you know, even when I was in prison, the chaplain asked me to be a chapel orderly. And I went to this service, and there were 2 or 3 songs that just really spoke to me. The first day I went to a local church in recovery, those 3 songs were playing. So there's so many God incidences in my story. You know, my husband now, who I met at a fellowship meeting, his dad and my mum's boyfriend used to work together. We had a kitten from the same litter like 25 years previously. You know, so for me, I didn't come into recovery with lots of hang-ups about religion. I came in feeling like I'd had friends that were part of the Salvation Army fellowship, and I always felt envious of their fellowship and and the support. So when I found that for myself and then linked in with recovery courses, it was the icing on the cake for me. So the church and other 12-step fellowship meetings complement each other so well. And even in my workplace and my study, every area of my life, I practice the principles of 12-step fellowship. So, yeah.
And exactly what the recovery course is about, it's the 12 steps, but with Christ at the heart of it. So tell us a bit more maybe about your faith journey, and then also the importance of taking inventory as well within the day, because that's what we're based on today, is a bit about step 10.
Yeah, so for me, my faith journey probably started in prison, but being part of the chapel orderly team. I've had suicide attempts that I'm surprised I survived. The motorbike, the serious infections, the bone infections, everything that happened with that, I'm surprised I survived. So when I came into recovery, I didn't have any problem with the concept of God. And my concept of God and my relationship with Christ have all developed. And it was very slow. I remember asking somebody in rehab, how do you pray? And they said, well, you start with the Lord's Prayer. And it's just evolved. And I realised I did a set of Christian steps in my first couple of years of recovery. And it talked about the characteristics of God. And I realised that I had put earthly people's characteristics, primarily my parents' characteristics, onto God. So I felt that I'd be punished if I didn't tithe at church. Yet I had no problems giving money at Narcotics Anonymous meeting. So it just really evolved, and I learnt that God loved me, warts and all. I linked in with connect groups, I linked in with other recovering addicts within the church fellowship and started building those networks.
And it is important, isn't it, to be around people that have also walked this journey. That's why we're doing this series, so that people can see there's other people out there that come from brokenness into hope.
Yeah.
But, it's also nice to have other people in your lives that haven't also walked that journey, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And for me, I did a Christian counselling course, and it was all about how, as human beings, we get our security, self-worth and significance from people, places and things. And this really links into my inventory, my step 10 process, because I felt so crippled with anxiety and low self-worth that if you'd asked me if I'd done something, I'd go, no, I'd lie, because I was so scared that if you knew who I really was, that you wouldn't want anything to do with me. So that's been a real journey where now I've got so much freedom with the step 10 that if I do upset somebody, I don't let it fester for days and days and be consumed with, oh no, what if they ring me, oh no, and that fear that goes with it. I just apologise. And it's been okay. Yeah. There have been relationships that I've damaged in recovery that haven't been repaired. There's been an awful lot that's been restored. The step 10 for me, I'm part of a step 10 WhatsApp group. This technology is phenomenal, isn't it? And each night we answer 2 questions, and they can be, what have I done today that I feel positive about? How have I been of service today? What defects have I acted out on today? Have I allowed myself to be too hungry, angry, lonely, tired? That HALT acronym. And that's been a beautiful process with probably, I think, 12 women every day sharing their inventory, and the vulnerability and the intimacy that stuff builds, and not only with God but with other people has been really beautiful.
And it's, what it is that I love, and I'm blessed because I'm a friend of yours, and it's not that you're just sitting here talking about it, you actually do what you talk about as well. Which is phenomenal, and that's what recovery gives us. You talk about anxiety, and anxiety grips so many people in addiction. And I get blown away even sitting here today. When I 13 years ago came into recovery, I couldn't be in a room with more than 2 people, and now I'm helping to produce and host television series. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's that thing, God can do so much more than we could ever ask or imagine, and you're living proof of that. So is there anything else you want to say to us that was life-changing for you?
I think when we first run the recovery course, I was 12 years in recovery, and there was one of the weeks that I just had one of those really loving, gentle light bulb moments, and it was about, excuse me, when things are said over us as children. And I guess for me, it's about remaining open-minded, and God will reveal himself, you know, at different points in the journey. So it's about, for me, being open-minded to still learn, to still be willing. And the recovery course, being a part of it, has just been phenomenal. Words don't do it justice, Emma. You know, I see people at their very, very worst, and now I see them at their very best. And you see, you know, I've walked alongside you, I've seen your journey. You know, it's just incredible. It really is, and it's a privilege to be involved in it. So thank you.
No, thank you. And one last word of encouragement to those watching from you today.
I think I genuinely believe, and I genuinely know that if I can get recovery and sustain recovery, have healthy relationships and maintain my life, I genuinely know that if you follow this programme, then you can too.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the wisdom and insight into your life, Louise.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be your friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this week is all about putting in action which keeps us grounded in truth and the reality of where we are on our journey, and that ensures our spiritual health. Through it, we own our mistakes, take responsibility for them and promptly admit them. It sounds a big task, yet as we practice this, it does become easier, and I know this from experience.
The great news is the recovery course is being run all over the country and online. If you want to find out more, you can watch the full TBN Recovery Course series or visit our website at www.therecoverycourse.com. Or if you'd like, you can email us at info@therecoverycourse.com or by searching on any of the social media platforms, The Recovery Course.
Join us next time for session 11, where we look at the 11th step. We look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye from us both.
Goodbye.